Hello, and welcome to the program presentation of Flying Start to Literacy Phonics Stage 3. This is the final stage of Okapi's Flying Start to Literacy Phonics series for stages 1, 2, and 3. Um, Flying Start to Literacy Phonics Stage 3 is an explicit, systematic, foundational skills resource for students in grade 2. Let's take a look at the resources that you'll see today. Everything you see today is available in print and digital for teachers and students. We're going to start with the teacher resource book, which will give all of the assessments, lessons, and ancillary assignments and activities for students to learn and to use. We'll also take a look at the 20 decodable texts that the students will get with this program. Let's start by taking a look at the teacher resource book. Again, print and digital for this. It always begins with some teacher professional development, which gives them an idea of how to go about these lessons because they're going to be looking at some less common sounds in stage 3. We have a quick overview of the assessments for placement and progress monitoring that's going to come up in just a moment. And then we get an overview of the lessons themselves. Now, take a look at the lessons. These are going to consist of 4 blocks of instruction. The first block will deal with oral language development. The second block will be for phonological awareness. The third block is phonics. And the fourth block is for high utility words. Inside of these blocks, we'll be able to take a look at the timing of how long they're prescribed to be used or to be taught. Block 1, the oral language development, will be for 30 minutes. Block 2, phonological awareness and phonics, 30. Block 3, phonics and writing, 30 minutes. And Block 4, consolidate learning or high utility words, will be for 30 minutes. And you can see the weekly timetable sample here. Typically, these are done in the course of 1 week. Moving into the scope and sequence, we can see that there are 2 modules. Each module consists of 10 lessons or units. So this would be basically 20 minutes or 20 weeks of instruction in Flying Start to Literacy Phonics Stage 3. Starting with the assessments, these are the student forms for them to read words, high utility words, to check for placement, and then you have the student record for teachers to check for fluency and accuracy here. Then we move into the lesson itself. So this will be the first unit or lesson within Module 1. And remember, these are done by blocks of instruction for 30 minutes each. The first one is oral language development, or say it, where we'll introduce a poem, look at vocabulary, and then have a review. And you can see how these lessons are very explicit for the teacher. Block 2, phonological awareness, or hear it. And every one of these, by the way, have goals for the teachers to learn. These are your TEKs. We're going to blend syllables, remove a syllable, rhyming words, and change sound. And then you have notes down at the bottom in case there is a need for differentiated instruction. That will give your teachers an idea of how to move with the student. Block 3, you have phonics, or write it, words with ow and ow. And then so we're going to start with the sound or the blend and then move into writing the words. Then you have morphology with compound words. And then finally, high utility words, looking at some of the words that may not necessarily follow the pattern of the words found in the first 3 blocks, but are needed, especially when we look at the decodable text later on. And then consolidate the learning, where we're going to hear and write, read it. This is where we're going to see some activities, some formative assessments, some games for students to learn or to play to check for understanding. And then this would be, we'd move to Unit 2. Again, oral language, phonological awareness, phonics, and high utility words. The lesson frame never changes within the units. What will change would be the content in which they're learning. Again, we'll go through the 10 units. And at the end of the last unit, we'll get to the decodable text. These are prescribed decodable texts that correlate with the lessons learned in the first 10 units. And we'll get into the decodables in just a moment. You have reviews to check for understanding. These would be more of your summative reviews after the module's finished. And then review of the high utility words. And then you move into module 2, where you have 10 more units of instruction. Again, the same lesson frame as every other unit you will see in Flying Start to Literacy Phonics Stage 3. And then at the end of the module, again, you have the 10 more decodable texts. And the end of the unit assessment. And then we move into your poetry. And these are the poems that are in the units in the oral language piece. These can be printed out, given to students. They can be put up on the smart board so that the students can read along with the teacher. You have high utility words. These again can be cut out for the students to practice, printed and cut. And then you have practice sentences. So these are not to be done at the end of each module. To be done at the end of each unit to check for understanding in the moment. These practice sentences follow the skills that the students learned within each unit, and their mentor sentences with the skills that they would learn in the unit. These can be printed, they can be cut out, but the goal is to read the sentences, but also to write their own sentences using the skills that they've learned. And then lastly, in the teacher resource book, you'll find all of the alphabet and blend cards for the students to have. These again can be printed out. They can be put on the smart board for students to have in their hands. Moving out of the teacher resource book and into the decodable text. Remember, these are to be done at the end of each module. There are 20 units in Flying Start to Literacy Stage 3. There are 20 decodable texts. Each decodable text reinforces the skills that they learned within the lessons. All of the decodable texts are print and digital. In the print version, there are 6 copies of every title for students to have in their hands. Let's take and the last thing, these decodable texts are both for fiction and informational text. Let's take a look at one of the decodables now. So this would be for stage 3. At the end of every decodable text, you'll have teaching notes. The teaching notes will be giving a before, during, and after the reading format. Before the reading, there's a phonics review of the skills that they learned and the high utility words to be able to make so that this text is accessible to students. Then we'll introduce the book. And then during the reading, the teacher is looking for the fluency, the accuracy, the expression, all of that. And then after the reading, since the copies decodables have a story from beginning to end, there are comprehension questions, both in the literal, inferential, and evaluative that the students can be asked. And then finally, there are phonics and phonological awareness extension lessons after the decodable text are done. Lastly, there is a teacher resource page. So all of the resources that we saw that can be printed out, the practice sentences, the high utility words, the picture cards and word cards, those can all be found on the teacher resource site, as well as scope and sequence for the teacher to have here. So this is just an extra layer of support for the teacher. And that is the entirety of Flying Start to Literacy Stage 3 Biocopy Educational Publishing. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.